What Love Maybe Is Not, by Nick Arandes. From the book's back cover, if love is supposed to represent union and joy, why do people equate it with fear and suffering? Assertions such as, love hurt, I suffered at the expense of love, I am afraid to love, I have to sacrifice for love, and in extreme cases when people physically or psychologically hurt one another, they attribute their behavior to some justification that involves the word love. In religious circles, it is said that God is love, while simultaneously saying that God punishes. I heard a comedian say, if you disobey God, you will end up burning in hell or purgatory for the rest of eternity. But remember, the guy loves you. Where we observe the most contradictory behavior when it comes to love is undoubtedly in interpersonal relationships. Does that imply that love is contradictory? Why not consider the possibility that any contradictions may be because whatever we have learned about love may not be true? This book is about how to let go of the fear that prevents us from experiencing love. But first, it will expose the most common beliefs about the subject, so we can begin questioning if what we think love is, maybe, is not. End of book's back cover. Because of the author's native Spanish accent, the content of this book will be read by Penelope, except for the chapter titles and the conclusion, which will be read by the author. Before we begin, it is worth mentioning that the author intends to offer information of a general nature to help readers in their quest for a deeper understanding. And even when the author practices what is contained in this book, if someone decides to use any of the information shared in these pages, be advised that the author and the publisher assume no responsibility for their actions. Now enjoy What Love Maybe Is Not.
Preface.
I heard a story of a newlywed couple celebrating Thanksgiving, where the whole family gets together, and as a traditional dinner they eat turkey. Interestingly enough, she only cooked half of the turkey, throwing the other half in the trash. Her husband asked her why she did that. She answered because her mom did it that way. Curious, the husband turned to his mother-in-law and asked her the same question. And her answer was because her mom did it that way. Neither his wife nor his mother-in-law questioned why they cooked half the turkey and threw the other in the trash. He decided to visit her wife's grandmother and told her that her daughter and granddaughter, when cooking the turkey, cook half and throw the other in the trash. He told her that his wife learned it from her mother and her mother learned it from her. The grandmother, laughing, told him that the reason was that she could not fit the whole turkey since the oven was too small. The moral of this story is, if we are not willing to question whatever we have learned, for the most part, we will end up assuming that lies are true. That being the case, is it then possible that what we have learned about love has nothing to do with what love truly is?
Introduction.
I titled this book What Love Maybe Is Not, even though the original title was What Love Is Not. The reason being is, the word maybe was added out of respect for anyone who differs from my point of view. Having said that, I felt inspired to write about the subject of love, because it seems to me that, if love is the source of happiness, why is it then that it is vastly associated with pain and suffering? I feel this is because the word, or the concept of love, has been given many meanings. And they all contradict each other. We will explore some of the most common meanings associated with love to see if maybe they are not true. In this way, we will be able to see if, perhaps, love is not the cause of suffering or pain, rather, it is what we believe about what love is, the cause of suffering and pain. Before continuing, I would like to pause to clarify the following. If you are familiar with the books I have written before, you will realize that my focus is always on becoming aware of our nature as that which words cannot describe. That is what love is for me. It is indescribable, eternal, omnipresent, where there is no separation. However, the way the subject is addressed in this book is completely accessible to every individual, regardless of their social status, cultural upbringing, spiritual belief, sexual orientation, or religiosity. I would also like to clarify that this is not a new belief system or even a philosophy. All I am saying is, since every definition we have about love is a belief, everything we have learned about it has to be questioned. And in this book, I will be using logical arguments so that the mind can be open to the possibility that, maybe, what we have learned about love may not be true. I'll start by sharing this example. If I ask you to bring me something blue, you would have to know unequivocally what the color blue is. Once you bring me that item, and I show it to everyone, collectively we would all agree that the item is blue. If I try to convince someone that the color of the item is red, they will surely laugh at me, or simply tell me that I am wrong. I'm not saying that the absolute truth is that the color blue looks one way. I am simply saying that there is a collective agreement that the color blue looks in a specific way. So that there is no chaos or confusion when communicating. Now I ask you, what is love? You may find that you don't know how to define it. Or maybe you think you do, and you will share with me what you have learned about it. But if I ask another individual the same question, and his answer differs from yours, I am not assuming that you are wrong. But for love to be true, everyone would have to share the same meaning. Otherwise, it is a personal interpretation. And that leads to experiencing interpersonal conflicts when it comes to expressing and sharing it. I am not going to define what love is. Together, however, we are going to explore the possibility of what love is not, so that the experience of love can be recognized as our natural state, which is permanent. So, let us begin this wonderful exploration.
Chapter 1. Every belief separates us.
When you interact with people, believe it or not, your interaction is not with them. Is with your thoughts about them. That is to say, a body appears in your visual field, it can be a stranger or someone you know. Then you go to your memory to make an evaluation. Based on that evaluation is that you relate to that other body. Let's say we have met. According to what you've heard of me or our past sharing, you form a concept of me. You relate to me according to that concept. Therefore, you never know who I am. But you think you do because you trust whatever belief you have about me. Now I ask you, what would happen if we meet, and you do not believe any thoughts that may appear in your mind about me? You would relate to me the same way a baby relates to another baby or another body. The baby does it without any judgment. That is why it is said that love is the absence of judgment. In this case, the absence of judgment means the absence of beliefs, not the absence of thoughts. However, it is obvious that to function in this world we need to make judgments. The difference is, judgments that are being made are rather descriptive and not condemnations. In other words, if I ask you to bring me an object, let's say that box that is blue, you have to make a judgment. Actually, in this case, two. The first one is the object, is a box. And the second one is that the color of that box is blue. Those are descriptive judgments that are useful, so when I ask you to bring me the blue box, you know exactly what to bring. Otherwise, you may bring a green bicycle. But again, the kind of judgment we are referring to here is any belief that could create separation between us. Love is our true essence. Any belief we have about it does not allow us to experience it. In a later chapter we will discuss the reason why we do not want to let go of our belief system, even though it is the key to releasing all fear and suffering. In the meantime, let's continue exploring what love maybe is not.
Chapter 2. Love is not wanting or desiring.
Imagine you have a dog that you love. And every time you see the dog wagging its tail, your heart fills with joy. One day your dog jumps over the fence and plays with the neighbor's dog. And while you see them playing, you realize that your dog is very happy. When you bring him back to your house, the dog feels sad. The neighbor tells you that he would have no problem keeping the dog. He would take good care of him, and is also good company for his dog. Since you know how happy your dog is with the neighbor and his dog, and how unhappy he is when it comes back to you, the love you have for the dog is what leads you to decide to give it to the neighbor. And every time you think about your dog, and how happy it is with your neighbor, you feel nothing but happiness. That is unconditional love. Now, what would happen if your partner, whom you say you love, wanted to move in with the neighbor, or whoever? Aren't you supposed to feel that same love and joy every time you think of him or her? If you do not feel that same happiness, it could be deduced that you did not love your partner. You just wanted him or her. You desired him or her. What is the difference? When you love someone, what matters most to you is what makes that person happy. However, when you want or desire someone, what matters most to you is what makes you happy. What happens is that when we say that we love this other person, and we behave what seems to be lovingly, pleasing them and trying to make them happy, we are manipulating the situation so that this person stays with us. We do it out of fear of losing that person. And that fear-based game of manipulation is what we have collectively convinced ourselves is love. In a later chapter we will talk about how to be able to love unconditionally. But for now, let's continue our exploration by sharing more analogies.
Chapter 3. If you love something, set it free.
You have surely heard the old saying, if you love something, set it free. If it comes back, it's yours. If it doesn't come back, it never was. Obviously, for someone whose belief system holds that to desire something or to want something is to love, that phrase is terrifying. How is it possible to set free something I want? In reality, it is a paradox in which, in turn, the benefit is mutual. Let's use this analogy. Let's say you have a cage and the door is kept open. In the cage, there is always food, enough water, and a roof to protect whatever is inside from the elements. If a bird enters that cage, and then you lock the door, you are imprisoning the bird. Therefore, you have to be very careful, because the moment you open the door, the bird leaves and will never come back. If, on the other hand, the bird enters, and is free to leave whenever it wants, it knows that the cage is a safe place to go. We all, believe it or not, have that cage. At first, it looks like a very inviting place that has the form of enough money in the bank to impress, a luxury car, career success, fine clothes, beautiful makeup to show an image, a modern hairstyle, a positive attitude, even when we may not feel that way. We play a good role, build a nice cage so that people see what we want them to see, and thus, not show what is really behind our facade. The moment the one we say we love is in our cage, we put a lock on that door in the shape of a wedding ring. The hidden message behind that ring is, you belong to me, and I belong to you. You are not free to do what you want, unless you have my approval, which simply has to do with your agreeing with my belief system. And in reciprocity, I also will not be free to do what I want, unless I have your approval, which means, I agree with your belief system. That is how we will live, supposedly, happily ever after. Of course, that is assuming that the couple shares a democratic belief system. Because if you come from a culture where women or men are being repressed due to cultural or individual beliefs, obviously there is not going to be an agreement. In other words, the man may sleep with other women while, if the woman sleeps with other men, she is punished, or vice versa. So, let's explore the consequence of that kind of imprisonment. As long as you give me what I want and I give you what you want, we say that we love each other, and that we are in love. But since our nature is freedom, although you adhere to my rules, those same restrictions that I have imposed on you, I have to place on myself. Now my freedom is being compromised by having established a rule that limits yours. That begins to generate resentment in me, without you having done anything wrong, except comply with the rule that I have set for you. And since it was fear that led to manipulate and trap you into staying in my cage, the terror of you leaving puts a great deal of pressure on me. Now I need to hold on to that image, to that psychological mask that I have made, which sooner or later will have to fall. In the same way, I have to hold on to this cage, that is to say, material possessions, particular lifestyle, for fear that you may find a better cage. And I'm willing to live that hell, because I said I love you, when in fact, I desire you, I want you. I don't love you because for love to exist there can be no fear. And the scenario I just described is pure fear. Yet, it is the scenario that is reinforced by most cultures, only because the concept of love has never been questioned. Before continuing, I would like to clarify that, regarding the wedding ring comment in a previous paragraph, I am not implying that there is something wrong with getting married. If marriage is viewed as a symbolic act of celebration, you could get married every year, even every day if you both want to. The difference is, marriage viewed from real love does not symbolize, nor represent any form of restriction, ownership, or imprisonment. When there is no fear, marriage is a beautiful way to share the unconditional love that two people feel for each other. So, when one is free from fear, there is no need to build a cage to attract or conquer anyone. When one feels unrestrained, comfortable, and free in the presence of the person with whom one is sharing the cage, although nothing is guaranteed, there is less chance that that person will be inclined to go look for a different, or even what may appear to be a better cage. As a consequence, what at first could have been considered a cage, it feels like home. Now the saying I shared at the beginning of the chapter has a new connotation. If you love something, set it free. If it comes back, it's not because it's yours. It is because both are sharing a path of unconditional love and true freedom. Questions such as, what about sex? Does that imply that the person can sleep with whomever he or she wants? Let's address that topic in the next chapter.
Chapter 4. Pleasure is not love.
The only meaning that life has for human beings is the constant seeking for pleasure and the avoidance of pain. Note that I said, this is the only meaning life has for human beings. As I mentioned in the introduction, my previous books point in the direction of transcending any concepts we have of what we think we are, which has nothing to do with this human experience. But again, this book is directed at our experience as separate individuals, and that is why, if it weren't for pleasure, the pain would be so unbearable that we could not cope with it. So, if we look at sex as a physical act, stripped of all meaning, without deriving such an intense source of pleasure from it, there would be no desire for intercourse. The problem here is obvious. The human species would become extinct. Therefore, that intensity needs to be there for human beings to continue procreating. What happens is, by associating a belief system to the sexual act, distortions arise that lead us to act in ways that could end up inflicting pain, whether physical and/or psychological, on ourselves, as well as those with whom we interact. Love is our true nature. When the mind doesn't hold on to any beliefs about love and sex, the sexual act is seen as an experience like any other. When it happens, is enjoyed without making it into anything special. Therefore, it does not affect our peace. And because there is love, the desire to seek sexual pleasure in other relationships tends to fall away.
Chapter 5. Relationships and friendships. Is there any difference?
It could be said that, yes, there is a difference, depending on how we are approaching the question. But for our discussion, continuing with the theme of pleasure, sexuality, and relationships, a fairly common belief is that two people who live together and do not have sex are considered to be just friends. But to be considered a relationship, they need to have sexual relations. This assertion, however, could be said to cause a lot of pain when there is intimacy between two people who love and appreciate each other very much, but have no sexual desire. As a result, they assume that they are not supposed to be together. There are relationships that, although are perfect for two people, yet, they end up separating because of the belief that sex not only is necessary so the relationship can be considered normal, but also because it has anything to do with love. If we go back to the previous chapter, by believing that love has something to do with pleasure, we make the mistake of allowing pleasure to direct our behavior. As a result, we find ourselves involved in relationships that can end up being extremely painful and highly dysfunctional, where there is no true intimacy, only pure desire, which again, is mistaken for love. It's amazing to learn that most relationships that have sex share no true intimacy whatsoever. Interestingly enough, most non-sexual friendships share a very deep sense of intimacy. To give you an example, a man who goes to bed with a woman, in that moment of intense physical activity and such deep pleasure, may even tell her that he loves her, that he is in love with her. Only when he has the orgasm, he wants to leave her. The same can happen to a woman. So, did pleasure have anything to do with love? The answer is obvious, not at all. I am not suggesting that there can't be experienced love in sex. All I am saying is, not to confuse sex with love. Sex is sex, and love is who you are. If we explore one of the main reasons why most marriages end in divorce, it could be deduced that it was because their union was based on a commitment that is practically impossible to keep. We are not going to deny that there are people who have met someone who ended up being their life partner. In some cases, these relationships lasted because there was love. In others, it is because of a belief that condemns divorce, fear of being alone, fear of what others may say, and so on. But the reason why a commitment such as, "till death do us part," is almost impossible to keep, is that if the relationship is based on pleasure, on attraction, which is what we call falling in love, pleasure is transitory. And pretending that we are happily married, when that is not the case, cannot be sustained for long. Why? Speaking in the first person, because the sense of lack in me, the seeming lack of love in me, is what triggered the desire, the feeling of attraction for that person. And it will remain there until it is healed. When the attraction, which mistakenly is referred to as love, begins to fade, people begin to doubt the relationship. They now imagine that they are no longer in love. And the feeling of lack now takes the form of desiring someone else. So, let's explore the idea of feelings of attraction and emotion that we usually associate with the concept of love.
Chapter 6. Is love a sensation, an emotion? Is it attraction?
Let's talk about attraction first, and then explore the possibility that love has nothing to do with feelings or emotions. This does not imply that love cannot be experienced as long as there are sensations and emotions. But that will become clear in due time. If we take a closer look at what attraction is, it can be seen that what drives it is a sense of lack. For example, if I feel hunger, it is because there is a sense of lack in me, which bring forth the desire to look for something to eat. If the sense of lack were not there, there would be no desire, therefore no reason to eat. However, we cannot deny the attraction that drives us to want or desire someone. We could write hundreds, even thousands of pages on the possible reasons why one person may be attracted to another. We can explore psychological concepts. We could talk about spirituality, past lives for those who believe in it, karma, and the list of possibilities is endless. But for what is shared here, that does not concern us. In reality, is very simple. All that there is a sense of attraction. The question that may arise now is, what can I do if I am attracted to someone in particular? We will address that in a later chapter. For now, I just wanted to clarify that this idea that attraction has to do with love, or that it is necessary so that two individuals live together in a healthy relationship, could begin to be questioned. Let's now address the subject of emotions and sensations that are so associated with love. When a person says that is in love, it usually has to do with a feeling, a sensation. The problem is, sensations and emotions are transient. The love that is being talked about here is permanent. Therefore, we are not rejecting the possibility that one can experience true love, while emotions and sensations arise. What we don't want to do is assume that the feeling or emotion is love. Because when the feeling is gone, does that mean there is no more love? No. It just means there is no sensation. This type of distortion is what makes love, which is our true essence, constantly go unnoticed. Even the word love is used as a justification for sensations and emotions that could be considered negative and painful. An example would be, believing that feeling jealous shows that I love my partner. This reminds me of an interview I heard on television, where the interviewer said that a small dose of jealousy is healthy. It's like saying that a small dose of cancer is healthy. No matter how small the feeling of jealousy is, that is an indication that love is absent. Because jealousy arises from fear, and we have already stated that love is the absence of fear. So, if we look at jealousy, what is behind it is a belief. Among different possibilities, one could be that I am an individual who is not worthy of being loved, and that at any moment I can be abandoned. Overlapping this belief is the belief that says, if I lose what I love so much, which psychologically I have turned into my source of life, I will die. It is like a drug addict who believes that his source of life comes from drugs. That false association does not allow him to realize that what he desires so much, what he supposedly loves so much, in other words, what he believes is his source of life, is what is killing him. And we could continue adding beliefs, which, as you can see, have nothing to do with a small healthy dose of jealousy. On the contrary, they have to do with hidden terror. And just like a cancer cell, even if it is only one, if it is not eradicated, it will continue to multiply. Jealousy, if not seen for what it is, a belief that needs to be healed, will continue to increase until the relationship turns into hell. Because who in their right mind would like to live with someone who set limits to his freedom? Other examples of distortions related to love would be when we say, I am afraid of love, love can hurt me, or I do not want to continue suffering for love. And surely there will be hundreds of variations on the theme. I remember that in one of my talks, when I asked the audience if love can experience fear, the vast majority said yes. So let's take a closer look at that. If we say that love can experience fear, it is because we are not talking about love. That is why I like to address that belief with the following question. Is it possible that light can experience darkness? The answer is obvious. Light cannot experience darkness. Because the darkness is the absence of light. That is, light cannot experience darkness because it is light. End of the story. So, let's go back to the question about love. Is it possible that love can experience fear? The obvious answer is no. Why? Because it is love. End of the story. That is why I say that if we are talking about fear, or suffering, jealousy, desire, attraction, or lack, we cannot be talking about love. Because love does not have specific attributes. Love simply is. And the only way we can recognize the love that we are, is by denying what love is not, is by letting go of all beliefs that we have about love. Not defining love, but rather questioning what we've learned about it. It comes a time when instead of falling in love with someone or something, we simply live in love. In love with what? In love with everything.
Chapter 7. Worrying for others is not love.
When we say that if we worry about a loved one it is because we love them, let's see if that is true. Worry is simply a thought about an imaginary future that generates fear in the present moment. And it has already been established that where there is fear, there can be no love. So when I say that worrying about someone suggests that I love them, what I'm saying is, I am afraid of how I would feel if something happened to them. That being the case, what I call a gesture of love, is simply a purely self-centered behavior because I'm only thinking about myself. Does that imply that if I don't worry about someone it's because I don't love them? That is not what it implies, because love has nothing to do with worries. Love is present and spontaneous. What it does imply is that if an individual, call it a loved one, was in danger, and there was something that could be done about the situation, with a mind free from worry, love would lead to act spontaneously. Once what could be done is done, life goes on. Let's say that someone I love is suffering in a hospital, and wants to leave this body. However, because of the love that I say I feel for him, instead of just comfort him, I cry and beg him to fight for his life, ignoring his struggle and pain because, again, I love him. But in reality, I am thinking about myself for fear of not wanting to feel the pain of losing him. Paraphrasing what was shared in a previous chapter, when we love, we think of them, when we want, we think of ourselves. And please, I do not want anyone to think I am suggesting there cannot be a genuine feeling of love towards a loved one who is ready to part, because of the feelings of loss and pain we may feel. All I am saying is, look at the possibility that in many cases, what is considered love, which according to the message in this book is the absence of fear, may not be love.
Chapter 8. Is there such a thing as tough love?
There is a very popular term that in English-speaking culture is known as tough love. It has to do with the fact that sometimes you have to be firm so that the person can learn a lesson. An example would be when a father raises his voice to a son to help him correct his behavior, otherwise, the consequences of his actions could be counterproductive to his well-being. Another example could be a person who has had too much to drink, and when he goes to grab the car keys, his best friend forcibly takes them from his hands. Or a person who, by not taking responsibility, is asked, by his own family, to leave the house so he can learn how to take care of himself. And there are endless examples we could use to show that sometimes you have to be assertive, and even use physical force, to prevent actions that could be very painful and damaging to those about to commit them. The problem here, once again, is when we equate the word love with a description. In this case, that is tough. And also, when we assume that our way of helping is the most loving. Because, even though on the surface our way of correcting may appear to be the right one, then it becomes obvious that it was not necessarily so. Love, as mentioned throughout this book, has to do with our essence as being, which words cannot describe. And when we are talking about love, we are speaking about something that corrects, not something that punishes. What is meant here is that if it were true that love is tough, choosing love for healing or comfort would not make any sense. Because, who in their right mind would choose love, if they knew that what is going to receive is punishment instead of a warm, comforting hug? That is why I prefer not to use the word love when I am talking about discipline, or some kind of corrective action. So, one question that could arise is, how do I know what is the proper corrective measure on my part when it is required to be firm, so the person knows is being lovingly corrected, as opposed to feel is been punished? The answer is simple, but goes unnoticed, because our behavior is governed by our belief system. However, before continuing with the answer, we have to consider the following. Correcting has nothing to do with making the person feel guilty. Generally speaking, the idea that guilt or fear, which are the same thing, is necessary for correcting behavior, although widely accepted, I would not say is true. Because that kind of quote-end-quote correction does not necessarily lead to healing. The only thing that can correct, and therefore heal, is love. Because without love, although guilt or fear may motivate someone to change behavior, there is an underlying resentment that remains hidden. That resentment or fear is ready to come out when you least expect it. That is why we hear stories of individuals who lived a very proper life, were, quote-end-quote corrected, meaning, punished by their parents, and all of a sudden ended up committing acts that caught everyone by surprise. Love leaves no negative residue. Therefore, the kind of correction that comes out of love results in true and permanent healing. Going back to the question that started in a previous paragraph, the first thing I have to do is humbly admit that I have no idea what would be the right thing to do. Then take a deep breath and ask for help. The way to do so is by first noticing how the scenario is making me feel. Do I feel anger, impotence, frustration, impatience? That is, if I am not experiencing peace, I must be experiencing fear. Always remember that when emotions are involved, we are not in the best position to help because all we would be doing is letting fear dictate our behavior. Once the emotion stops being a distraction and the mind is receptive, speaking in the first person, I can imagine giving that person a big hug and extending my love. With this new energy, I know that my intention is not to punish, but rather to show a different way of seeing or doing things, without presuming that I know best. That's humility. This is how I can allow love to act through me. Consequently, we both benefit and learn the same lesson. That love is what we are, and that only love heals. Let's pay close attention to what I'm going to share next. When in a previous paragraph I commented that the first step is to humbly admit that I have no idea what is right, this is the attitude that needs to be maintained at all times. Otherwise, when a situation arises that leads us to correct someone, our belief system will act immediately. This is known as reacting instead of responding. The goal is not to correct with love. It is to live under the awareness that love is who we are. Now is possible to see that this notion of tough love makes no sense. When you rest in the love that you are, you will always respond from this newfound awareness. And if a correction requires firmness, the energy that drives you to take corrective measures will not be overlaid with fear. In that sense, a father can raise his voice to a son, while simultaneously, in his mind he finds himself smiling, as if he is subconsciously telling him, "Son, you are not doing anything wrong. I love you a lot. I just need to raise my voice because it's the only way I can get your attention so, hopefully, you can change your behavior. Because the consequences of it could end up being very harmful to you." Using the example of the person who had too much to drink and is going to grab his car keys, it could be handled as follows. The friend, instead of running to him in fear attempting to take away his car keys, maybe puts his hand on his shoulder, tells him a couple of jokes, and they laugh for a while. Then very calmly, convinces him to stay the night instead of driving. And with the example of person who does not want to take responsibility, he may still be asked to leave the house. Only that it would be done without making him feel guilty or remorseful, respecting whatever lessons he needs to learn. And you might ask, what about people who have committed crimes? The answer is the same. Yes, they have to be apprehended. The difference is, instead of being taken to an institution for punishment, call it prison, they are taken to a rehabilitation center, which would be that same prison, only with a different purpose or context. A place where love can facilitate rehabilitation. Otherwise, you can take the person to jail and make him feel guilty. But when he steps out into the world, assuming the sentence wasn't life in prison, the fear that was never healed is very likely to resurface, and he may end up being a repeat offender. If you read between the lines, this is what I want to say in this chapter. The unloving behavior of others, however wrong it is or appears to be, puts us in touch with our hidden fear. Therefore, the emotions that arise in us only show our lack of inner love. That is why, speaking in the first person, I will never be able to help anyone, unless the healing takes place in me first. And the only thing that is required of me is very simple. It is not new learning. It is humility. And to experience humility, I need to set aside everything I think I know, trusting that love, through me, always knows best. Therefore, love is neither hard nor soft. Love simply is.
Chapter 9. I love you, but I don't need you.
Love, for how it is addressed in this book, is our sustenance. But that sustenance does not come from anywhere else, except life itself. What sustains us is life itself, it is love itself. However, that is overlooked when we assume that our source of life, our source of love, our source of sustenance, comes from something in this world. In this case, a person. Hence, the belief that I need you is a belief, because no human being needs another for his survival, except infancy to independence. When it comes to need, the only reason a female would need a male is to procreate. The proof is that there are people who have lived alone, whether in a cave or a house in the mountains, without the need of another person. Before continuing, the desire to have a family or to live in a community, we are not ruling that out. What we are doing is dismantling any concept about what love is, so that we do not lose sight of the fact that love is our natural state, in which we permanently rest. So, why do we keep looking for love in all the wrong places, assuming that we need something that is actually within? 2 things. First, believing I am a separate individual, and second, the fear of death. Let's talk about the fear of death by going back to the example of a drug addict. Aside from any temporary sensations that may be derived from the drug, be it relaxation, a hallucinogenic experience, or intense pleasure, what ultimately makes that person do anything, including stealing and killing for it, is the belief that the drug is his source of life. We know that this is not the case. Because when an individual enters a rehabilitation center and is locked in a room, where he does not have access to drugs, that is, to what he believes is his source of life, that person experiences very intense sensations. The body may shake uncontrollably and sweat excessively. He may even feel dizzy, have convulsions, and may experience all sorts of extremely unpleasant and painful sensations. But he doesn't die. However, that person is living and experiencing sensations that, according to him, are like death. And to avoid feeling death, he immediately looks for the drug. Only in this case, not having access to it, he has to go through that intense experience to realize that the drug wasn't his source of life, it's not his sustenance. When we equate love with an external need, we are doing exactly what the drug addict does. Except that instead of projecting that belief onto a substance like a drug, we project it onto a person, to the person we say we love. In this sense, the person becomes our source, our drug. In contemporary songs, those we call quote-unquote love songs, we say that that person is our source of love. But again, the belief behind it is that this person is our source of life, and that is why we say we need them. And when that person leaves, we feel the same psychological death that the drug addict feels, which in extreme cases can lead us to commit suicide, or even murder. That is why in a previous chapter, it was mentioned that there is no such thing as a healthy dose of jealousy. Because the root of jealousy is the belief that I need that person, that belief implies that, without that individual I'm left without sustenance, I'm left without life, I'm left without love, and therefore, I can die. This belief in needing another human being, which we have in turn linked to our concept of love, is constantly being reinforced in our culture. Not being questioned, ends up being one of the main sources of fear, suffering, and pain. Love songs, as mentioned earlier, which I honestly prefer to call codependency songs, constantly reinforce it with lyrics like, I need you, I can't live without you, and so on. The content in soap operas, television, and cinema reinforces that belief. Anyone could misunderstand the message of this book by saying that love is being stripped of its passion and romance. Quite the contrary. What is being stripped of is the drama. The problem is, we believe that drama is normal. Some even think that it is what gives life its spark. In that sense, just like a drug addict cannot live without drugs, someone addicted to drama cannot live without it. It craves it. But when the intensity of the suffering caused by the drama is extremely painful, one is ready to seek help. That help can take the form of information like this, which is initially resisted because it goes against everything we've learned. But when we realize that most of what we have been taught about love has served us to live a life in pain and suffering, we are ready to discover the love that we are. And when we live in that state of love, meaning peace, for the first time we can say to a loved one, I can honestly say that I love you, because I do not need you. I feel that what has been shared so far is enough to be open to the possibility that what we have learned about love may not be true. In the remaining chapters, we will explore how to undo our belief system in this regard, so that we can experience the peace and happiness that is our true nature as love.
Chapter 10. Relationships as Bridge for Healing.
The human condition is an experience of separation. The love we are talking about here represents oneness. Therefore, it could be said that love constantly wants to feel complete, not separate. In that sense, the attraction that we can feel towards someone, regardless of what the apparent cause is, at a more intimate level, is our desire for union. Not with that specific person, even if it seems that way. It is the desire for union with everything, so that this feeling of separation is no longer experienced. So, let's take a closer look at the attraction. What to do when you feel a strong attraction towards someone? Is it denied? Is it suppressed? Is it ignored? No. It is simply recognized for what it is, an attraction. If the desire to meet that person persists, we can allow ourselves to meet them. And if a more intimate relationship arises, it is seen as a great opportunity to look at all the hidden fears, so that, in the light of love, can they be healed. Therefore, for any relationship, no matter how difficult it may be, to utilize it as a great opportunity for healing, all you have to do is change its purpose. That is all. The purpose that fear has for every relationship is to hold on to it at any cost. However, according to the vision shared here, is to let go of any attachment to it. And this purpose we are referring to is completely missed at first, because we are so hypnotized by attraction and desire that we cannot see that what is behind it is fear. Once fear starts to surface, one of two things tends to happen. 1, we start blaming, justifying, or running away from the relationship, bringing with us all of our unresolved issues, ready to project them into the next relationship. As a result, we begin to formulate conclusions such as love is painful. Or 2, we appreciate everything that is arising within, so instead of blaming or projecting it onto our partner, we allow love to do the healing. That is how the fear of love disappears, along with the sense of need. And that individual, to whom we were initially attracted, regardless of how painful or difficult the relationship might have been, either the relationship continues, or is time for each to go in separate ways. The difference is, when we think of that person, a profound sense of gratitude is felt. And what chemistry or attraction did, it brought us together so that we both could heal. Let's explore this attraction issue a bit more before continuing. There is a belief stating that opposites attract. However, I would go so far as to say that what makes someone attracted to another person is not so much the differences, but rather the similarities. Let's say, for example, that two people feel a strong attraction. They equate that attraction with love. On the surface, anyone would say that they are opposites because their personalities or preferences are so different. However, when coexistence begins, there is a lot of drama and a sense of victimhood. In that sense, it could be said that what attracted them was what the two had in common, the addiction to drama, and the deserving of victimization. Nevertheless, a strong attraction was there. The thing is, there have also been relationships where that attraction, that chemistry, was not there. However, the affection, respect, the enjoyment of being together, allowed them to live happily for the rest of their lives. That is why, and I repeat, we are looking at the beliefs and concepts we have about what love is, so we can question the possibility that what we have learned about love may not be true. Once fear has been removed, in the case of relationships, a question that might arise is, how do I know who is the person I am supposed to share my life with? As long as we don't talk in terms of the future, that is, we don't start fantasizing about wanting to stay with that person forever, the person with whom you are supposed to share your life, not the rest of your life, because there is no such thing, is the one you are with right this moment. If you are not with anyone, the person with whom you have to share your life is you. It's that simple. In this sense, concepts such as partner, husband, wife, etc., are eradicated. And the person with whom we find ourselves living could be referred to as a companion on our journey through life. For legal purposes, however, terms such as husband or wife, in the same way, for conversational purposes, significant other, boyfriend, or girlfriend, can be used. Only that, deep down we know that all those concepts are meaningless. Let's explore how we can release our beliefs about love, by looking at the underlying fear that holds them in place.
Chapter 11. From Fear to Love.
Once the purpose of the relationship is established, the question that now arises is, what can I do so that the transformation that is being discussed here can take place? The answer is very simple. Change partners. I'm not talking about looking for another human being. What I am suggesting is, instead of paying attention to the relationship, looking for ways to fix it, direct your attention to the latent wisdom within, that in turn transcends the confines of the mind. That is the partner I am referring to. That partner is what is known as peace. In other words, choose peace above all else. The consequence will be the release of fear and the recognition of love. But for that peace to be wholeheartedly chosen, we must be willing to set aside our belief system. That is, forget everything you have learned. Interestingly enough, we are afraid to let go of our beliefs because they are the pillars that sustain the concept we have of ourselves. Everything you have read so far, whether you agree or not, on an intellectual level, is something the logical mind can grasp and understand. If you remember the introduction, I mentioned that the books I had previously written speak of our nature as that capital letter that words cannot describe. That is the love we have been talking about in this book. And for that love to be recognized, we need to explore a more abstract aspect of ourselves. Knowing that words are limiting, they may serve as pointers to a reality that transcends our human experience. But they are not the answer, nor the experience itself. It would be like trying to describe the taste of sugar cane. Words will not serve for you to have the experience. They are helpful if I use them to direct you to a sugar cane field, then give you instructions on what to do. Once you bite into the cane and taste it, that is the answer. That is to say, the experience itself is the answer, not an intellectual understanding. Let's continue then, with the remaining chapters, and see if the words you are about to read can open your mind to a love that is omnipresent, infinite, and unconditional. Believing to be a separate individual, the desire for closeness with bodies, is symbolic of what I deeply long for, union with my, capital S, self. Interestingly enough, I don't need to join with my, capital S, self because I am the self. But as long as I perceive myself as something separate from the rest, I will be attracted to other parts. So, the belief that I am a separate individual is the root of all problems. And the rest of the beliefs, call them positive or negative, only serve to support that fundamental belief. That is why it is said that for the human being to experience liberation, he has to learn to die while he is alive. Let us remember that the death we are talking about here is not physical, but psychological. And what hurts is not letting go of our beliefs, is wanting to hold on to them. The benefit of peace, when chosen wholeheartedly, is that fear vanishes. Because what we are choosing is love. That love is the immovable and permanent background in which we eternally rest. That background or space is before any beliefs, including the belief that says, I am a separate individual. Speaking once again about attraction, what makes you feel attracted to something, or someone, is believing that whatever it is you are attracted to, or desire, can bring you happiness or peace. I know this may be a bit of a stretch for the mind, especially if you are not familiar with this kind of information. All I am asking is, if you have suffered the consequences of not experiencing the love you have been seeking, see where this information is pointing to. In the end, you can always discard what I have been sharing, and continue living life as you know it. Before continuing, I would like to clarify what happiness means according to what is shared here. There is a collective belief that pleasure and happiness are the same. That is why when people talk about the pursuit of happiness, what they are usually referring to is the pursuit of pleasure. However, pleasure, just like any other sensation, is transitory. The happiness spoken of here is permanent. In that sense, peace and happiness are synonymous. You can be laughing out loud in the same way that you can be experiencing excruciating pain, but if you do not identify with any thought that judges laughter as something positive, or pain as something negative, you rest in that permanent peace. That is happiness. Having clarified that, let's continue. When we hold on to the belief that something in the world can bring us happiness, it is obvious that we will spend our time chasing whatever that is, as well as being attracted to everything that we consider our source of well-being. However, from our own experience, there comes a time when we realize that, no matter what we are chasing, especially after having obtained many of the things we wanted, the feeling of lack remains. And although at first, we believe that we have to keep looking for more things to cover that feeling, frustration and disappointment lead us to give up. Giving up, or surrendering, allows the experience of peace to settle, when we stop chasing whatever we believe would bring us peace or make us happy. Let us not confuse surrendering with resignation. They are different things. True surrender leads to peace, whereas resignation leads to pain. Once peace becomes a priority, when we feel the desire to pursue something, even when we feel an attraction to someone, we take time to observe what we are feeling, and reflect on whether we are willing to sacrifice our peace. This does not imply there is anything wrong with moving in the direction of something we desire, or may feel attracted to. But it does imply that we are going to be drawn to something or someone who contributes to our inner peace. That being the case, speaking about relationships, no matter how attracted you may feel to a person, any hint of drama or conflict will be enough to, once again, choose what is most important to you, peace. From now on, it is a matter of observing how your life unfolds, resting in that peace that is a representation of the love that you are. It is that simple. Love is self-evident. No philosophy can teach you what love is. But they can point in the direction of denying what love is not. And since our experience as human beings overshadows our essence as being, as love, anything that can be felt, perceived, imagined, understood, believed, labeled, etc., cannot be love. Because love is everything. Using the gold analogy, I feel it serves to illustrate the message I am trying to convey. Imagine the molten gold. What is there is gold, and nothing else. Right off the bat you grab that gold and shape it into a bracelet. The moment you perceive a bracelet, you think you are seeing an object separate from the gold. But in reality, the only thing you are seeing is gold. What this implies is that you are not seeing a bracelet. You are seeing the word bracelet in your mind. But if you let go of the word bracelet, and don't let the shape of what you are seeing fool you, you never lose sight of the fact that gold is all there is. The appearance of a human being, like everything that is perceived around us, is only an obstacle to the underlying energy that we all are. That omnipresent energy is what is known here as love. That is why love is not something you seek or get. Is what you are. And as I mentioned in a previous chapter, love simply is. If you don't let yourself be distracted by appearances, or rather by the names you give to each perceived object, simply by looking around you, you will realize that you are surrounded by pure love. And that love includes the absence of the concept of I as a separate individual. But then again, when the time comes to begin exploring the nature of your being, as spoken to us in every spiritual philosophy, you will be inspired to move in that direction. Meanwhile, prioritizing peace above all else is the starting point. And if the question of how I function in this world as a result of this understanding arises, the answer is very simple. The same way you always have. Except instead of looking for love, you just extend it because that is who you are. And since peace is the most important thing in your life, not having the slightest interest in drama or conflict, every scenario is used to reaffirm your life purpose, which in the end, is the release of all beliefs so you rest in the love that you are. And, by the way, releasing beliefs does not imply stopping thinking, since every belief is a thought. It is rather to stop believing your thoughts. Thoughts are used for practical purposes, not emotional ones. That is, thought is used to know how to open a door, not to curse the door if for some reason it does not open. In a relationship, thought is used to tell your spouse to remember to meet you at dinner at 8 o'clock at night in the restaurant, not to curse him or her, if for some reason he or she does not show up. Ceasing to believe any stories the mind fabricates, love takes care of the healing of the mind, not you, with your intellectual reasoning.
Chapter 12. Words of Caution.
Recognizing that we are love, which implies the absence of fear, sounds very attractive. In fact, completely desirable. However, we have to recognize that, because our belief system has intervened before that recognition, which in turn, we assume is our identity, the transformation from fear to love can sometimes be experienced as psychologically distressing. It does not have to be this way. But on occasion, makes it seems unbearable is the resistance to letting go of our belief system because, again, that is where we derive our sense of identity. If we are honest with ourselves, we might recognize that, sometimes, we are willing to die before letting go of some passionately cherished belief. The reason why I titled this chapter Words of Caution is to let you know that if you want to experience love, that is, if you want to know truth, if you want peace above all else, you must first be willing to look at every obstacle that the mind has placed, which is every belief. If you can look at them without judgment, there is no pain or suffering. But, as long as you want to hold on to your sense of identity, letting go of your belief system is interpreted as a threat, which in turn, is the cause of all psychological fear, suffering, and pain. Let's see if the following analogy help to make this message clear. Imagine a metal container with a depth of 36 inches or 91.44 centimeters. You can call it a trash can or whatever you want. At the bottom lies a precious diamond. Initially, all you have to do is look inside the container to get that diamond. But instead of looking, you started filling that container with garbage. Now that the container is full, you can't see the diamond at the bottom. However, the only way you can get back to the bottom of that container is to insert your hand and take out all the garbage, one by one, until you reach that diamond. What I mean by that analogy is that you are the container, and with a mind free of beliefs, meaning garbage, you discover the diamond, which is the love you have been searching for all your life. And, again, since that belief system is what creates your sense of identity, letting it go requires a psychological death, not a physical one. That's why, as I mentioned before, we are not trying to define what love is, or discover love. We are throwing away the garbage, throwing away everything we've learned about it. So, when the journey of remembering our true nature begins, all the garbage comes to the surface, not to be judged, not to be interpreted, not to be analyzed, but to be seen as garbage that is meaningless and powerless. Here is where the words of caution come in. During that time, the body may experience pathological symptoms without even having any pathology. Some people may experience a sense of desolation, apathy, or a feeling that they are in no man's land. Some may even experience what could be diagnosed as depression. But those are different ways that fear tries to draw attention to our sense of identity, to the body. And the only thing that can be done, while this transformative process is taking place, is to surrender completely. Is willing to die. And once again, it is not the body that is dying, it is our belief system. Without adhering to any type of philosophy or religious belief, in the Bible for example, the phrase the narrow gate, which states, enter through the narrow gate. For wide is the gate and broad is the road that leads to destruction. Matthew 7 verses 13 to 14. It implies that we have to be willing to go deep into our fear, so the love that we are, the diamond at the core of our being, can be recognized as who we are, and not as something we look for outside. Once I heard someone say that this path is not for cowards. But in reality, we all have to go through the narrow gate because the alternative is suffering. I am not saying this to scare you or discourage you from discovering the diamond that you are. Once again, please pay close attention. All the pain and discomfort that may arise have nothing to do with love, or even with the rediscovery of it. It has to do with the resistance to letting go of everything we have learned. In case you have not noticed, although this book appears to be about love, it is an invitation to free yourself from fear. And the liberation I am talking about here will not happen because you have read this book. It will happen because your nature as love is trying to break through whatever obstacles are covering it. And no matter how much you continue to believe that you are something limited and separated from love, you will not be able to sustain your false sense of identity for long. Sustaining the image you have forged of yourself is hard, is very difficult, is exhausting, and extremely painful. And yet, it is easier to surrender and rest in your nature as love, as peace. Let us now spend the next chapter exploring how to navigate through the shadows of fear and uncertainty, that, while they may take on the appearance of physical or psychological discomfort, are nothing more than harmless distractions.
Chapter 13. Walking through the Valley of Shadows.
I often say that, for the obvious to be evident, the mind must not be present. If we stop believing the mind, what remains is a sense of presence in which we permanently rest. That sense of presence is what is referred to in this book as love. Let's do a little exercise that will take less than a minute. If your life is going well, and you feel comfortable, this may not be the time to enjoy the benefit of this exercise. However, if you are going through challenging times, do this. Take a deep breath and exhale. With your eyes open or closed, don't believe anything the mind is selling you. I did not say avoid the thoughts, or don't think. I said, stop believing your thoughts. Now I ask you, during that time that you were not believing the thoughts, and that you were fully present, no matter what the body may have been feeling, were you able to experience tranquility? You can't deny that the answer is yes, even if it was only for a moment. Isn't that proof enough, that when you stop believing in the content of your mind, you rest in peace? And by the way, the words, rest in peace, are not only to be written on a headstone. It is our natural state, always. Once again, when we stop believing our thoughts. From the book, I Am That, Nisargadatta Maharaj said. No particular thought can be mind's natural state, only silence. Not the idea of silence, but silence itself. When the mind is in its natural state, it reverts to silence spontaneously after every experience, or, rather, every experience happens against the background of silence. So, what is it that prevents us from experiencing love as our permanent state of being? The addiction to our sense of identity, which again, has to do with what we believe about who we are. I chose now the word addiction, to explore the same subject from a different angle. When I have been invited to speak at drugs rehabilitation centers, I emphasize that, although it appears to society that they are addicts, the reality is that we all suffer from the same addiction. We are all addicted to the belief that we are separate individuals. And the consequence of that addiction is reflected in our behavior. In some people, the desire to feel whole and loved is sought through ingesting substances to cover the pain that is experienced when believing to be a separate individual. However, we do not realize that all of us are trying to cover that same pain, only that we do it with addictions that appear to be more benevolent. Addictions such as watching excessive television, being a workaholic, playing video games, the need to be constantly talking on the phone, the need to always be involved in some activity, and the list is endless. Note that I did not say that there is anything wrong with wanting to work, play video games, talk on the phone, wanting to get involved in some activity, etc. I said that we are addicted to the need. When it is a need, is an addiction, no matter how innocent, benevolent or, better said, socially acceptable, may seem to be. This reminds me of what Blaise Pascal once said. All of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone. Why? Because we are alone with our thoughts, with our beliefs, with our garbage. And not having something or someone to distract us with, there is no other option but to look for love within us. Which is where it has always been, and where it had never occurred to us to look. Why? Because there was so much trash covering it, we didn't want to feel the pain that comes from not wanting to drop the trash. And what we did, was cover the trash with more trash. Cover beliefs with more beliefs. Another way to put it, looking for more and more pleasure until the pleasure became our new pain. For example, let's say that I have learned that when I become a millionaire I will be happy. That is a belief, a piece of garbage. But since I am convinced that this is true, especially since society supports that belief, I do everything possible to obtain that $1 million. And even when L derived some transitory pleasure, I still feel dissatisfied because $1 million was not enough. So the mind thinks, surely 2 million will do. That is another belief, another piece of garbage. I may continue to add millions, or find myself looking elsewhere for satisfaction. That could be an attractive partner. That is another belief, another piece of garbage. When that partner does not satisfy me, surely it is that I need a different one. This is another belief, another piece of garbage. Not feeling satisfied, I imagine it has to do with the fact that the house I live in is not big enough. That is another belief, another piece of garbage. When there is so much garbage, and I still don't feel that satisfaction, I try to cover that pain in whichever way possible. That is why I say to people battling addictions, that there is no reason to feel guilty. We are all doing what we can to cover the same pain. It's just that for some people, drugs are their means of escaping pain, while for most, it will take socially acceptable means. The only way I know to become free of addiction, as I said in an earlier chapter, is by changing partners. That is, by wanting truth, by wanting peace above all else. And if you ask how to make that choice, the answer is so simple and so obvious that, paradoxically, it is overlooked. It can be summed up in one word: surrender. The entire content of this book is summed up in that one word. Total surrender is what is needed so that the transformation that I am talking about can take place. Because love is what takes care of the transformation, not the individual, not the mind. Only love heals. And love has been wanting to do so all your life. And when fear arises, since it means the life of the false sense of identity is at stake, all that can be done is observe, feel, and trust the process. Which is the complete opposite of what the mind encourages us to do. Because in the absence of the mind, the heart opens. As this book is coming to an end, I'm going to share one last analogy. Let's say you are in a room, and a holographic image of a monster is projected in front of you. Every time that image approaches you, you take a step backward. Interestingly enough, you are not terrified by what that image can do to you. You are terrified for having believed that the image is real. That belief has nothing to do with the image itself. It is a thought in your mind. Is an evaluation you are making about the image. As long as you continue to believe the thoughts about the image, you will continue to walk backward to avoid confronting it. However, since the exit door is behind the image, you need to go through the image, to be able to save yourself from what the image will do, if it catches you. As you keep walking backward to avoid confronting the image, you hit the back wall. Meaning, you find yourself between the image and the wall. Completely terrified, you close your eyes and try not to look at that image that, by itself, has no power to harm you. But again, the seeming power that image has over you, you have given it. You have done so by believing the thoughts, that is, the garbage in your mind. Then comes a time, when you are so tired and fed up with the pain and the suffering, that you don't care if you die. That's when you look at that image, ignore your thoughts about it, and start walking toward it. Interestingly enough, as you approach the image, it now begins to take a step back. The reason is, if you get close enough, you will realize that it was just an image, and it will stop affecting you. But, again, it is not the image that has any effect on you. It is believing your thoughts about the image that affects you. When you finally go through the image, it disappears, and you find yourself in front of the exit door. You don't go through that image by analyzing it, understanding it, dissecting it, or judging it. You go through it by walking towards it, despite whatever you are feeling as a result of what the mind may be telling you. If you stay in your mind, you will waste your time trying to make something of it, when in reality, that image is nothing. It is just a play of light. That is why, we are not using the mind to free ourselves from fear, and discover the love that we are. That discovery becomes evident, when we let go of all we have learned about love. You are that love, not what you believe you are. And that is why for that love to be recognized, your sense of identity has to disappear. The peace that you will discover, as a result of being willing to let go of any belief, is the only evidence you need to validate what is being said in this book. Don't believe anything I say. Do your investigation, and see for yourself. And again, the peace, the love I am referring to here, has nothing to do with sensations, emotions, desires, rejections, or anything in that regard. It simply is.
Conclusion. The first half will be read by Penelope. The second half will be read by me, just so that I don't seem like a stranger to you, while, at the same time, you get to listen to the one who actually wrote the book.
If reading this book has generated some degree of discomfort, remember that it is not the message that generated the discomfort, it is whatever belief you are holding on to, that is in opposition to the message printed on these pages. However, whatever beliefs you have about love, know that I honor and respect them. I do want you to know that if you are happy with the concept you have about love, and that is reflected in your well-being and your interpersonal relationships, discard anything I have shared that opposes your point of view. Just remember that, love, according to how it is viewed here, is neither a belief, nor can it be defined. It simply is. If, on the other hand, you find yourself being afraid of love, or experiencing suffering, the message in this book offers an opportunity to explore another way of approaching that subject. My desire is for you to experience real happiness. I said real because the happiness that we are talking about here, the love that we are referring to here, is not temporary. It is eternal, it is permanent. And as mentioned in a previous chapter, the resistance to recognizing the love that we are, can take the form of a psychological attack, or emotional pain, and can even be somatized in the body as a physical condition. The question that may arise is, how to treat these symptoms or conditions. Although surrender has already been discussed, to ensure there are no misunderstandings, the invitation here is to observe how life, meaning love, take care of removing any obstacles to its recognition. And it is reflected in the decisions that the individual is inspired to make, as well as the events that manifest, call them synchronicities, coincidences, etc.
So, if a physical condition arises that requires medical attention or psychological or therapeutic help, the inspiration to go after that kind of assistance will arise very spontaneously, while at the same time, life, also known as love, will manifest whatever is needed. That is why I once heard that when there is total surrender to love, which would be another way of saying complete acceptance to what is, with a peaceful and receptive mind, you will move through the world as an environment and not as an individual. And whatever love ends up doing through you will always be better than anything you can think of. I don't know what life has in store for you. I don't even have the slightest idea of what life has in store for me. I am only a witness to the words that are being written, inspired by an energy that does not need to be named. If you resonate with this message, as previously said, you can apply it to your life so that your experience will dictate whether what is being shared here serves you. Remember that what you think you own owns you. Like the analogy of the warden whose job is to watch over the prisoner 24 hours a day. Although the warden is outside the cell and the prisoner is inside, the reality is that both are prisoners. What I mean is, whatever belief you want to hold on to will have the power over you, will own your mind. It will become your warden. And you could argue, but why not exchange a negative belief for a positive one? The answer I would offer is, although exchanging a negative belief for a positive one may seem or even feel better, the experience of freedom that we are referring to here will be missed. Because that freedom is the absence of beliefs. And we must remember that this world is governed by polarities. That is to say, behind every positive, there is its opposite, a negative waiting to show its face. Therefore, we are not talking here about how to make a better version of the individual. The invitation is to let go of whatever version of yourself you have fabricated based on your beliefs so you can rest in the eternal freedom that you are. To replace the limited with the unlimited, the temporary with the permanent, the darkness with light. In short, to replace fear with love. Hi, I'm Nick Arandes, the author of the book. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, make sure you share it with everyone that you know. And if you got some benefit from it, I would ask you to please purchase the book, or you can make a donation at my website, nickarandes.com, because it compensates for the amount of time that it takes to put this information together and make it available so you can actually benefit from it. Having said that, what I wish for you is a life filled with love, happiness, and peace.
If you enjoyed this book and would like to order your copy or to find out about the author's many books, visit his website at www.nickarandes.com. That is NICKARANDES.com.